Incinerating and slicing your way through hordes of enemies is an exhilarating and engaging approach to crushing content in Lords of the Fallen. Combining this with the ability to continuously ignite and detonate explosions that engulf your enemies in a relentless inferno of hellfire whilst maintaining infinite stamina makes this build a #1 choice if you want to see your enemies turn to ash in the wake of an infernal surge of destruction. If you want to play as an explosive, unrelenting, inferno-focused melee character that has the ability to detonate explosive chain reactions of near nuclear proportions, all while surging through the battlefield, turning your enemies to ash wearing a grim and ghastly grin, then this spicy concoction is the build for you. Phase Shifter here, and thank you for checking out my Explosive Grin Reaper build. In today's video, we're breaking down what is, in my opinion, one of the best burn ignite builds that has the ability to do consistently high damage whilst maintaining almost permanent uptime, even when out of melee range. We'll be going over the stats, weapons, armor, rings, pendants, and rune choices that make this build a fire-obsessed Explosive Grin Reaper with incredibly synergistic mechanics to deploy. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. In the early game, the main stats to focus on is Inferno for damage scaling and Vitality for survivability. Initially, you will require around 20 points in Endurance to have ample stamina to utilize in the early to mid game. My advice here would be to get Inferno to 75 and Vitality to 40, then fill in the rest in any order of your choosing. It should be noted that this build focuses on using 2 grinning axes, which scale with Inferno only. Another option for those of you that don't have access to the second axe is using Bloodlust. This weapon scales with Inferno and Agility, so you may want to consider spreading your points more equally between these 2 stats if this is the route that you choose. You can, of course, just use 1 grinning axe if you'd also prefer. My final stat points are now on the screen. I chose to stat 60 into Vitality for more life, and Radiance got some love as it gives resistance and increased mana, which supports the frequent casting of buff sorceries. If you're a min-maxer, I would recommend starting with the Pirate Cultist due to the fact that they begin with 18 Inferno. For the primary weapon, I am dual-wielding grinning axes. This choice centers around 3 factors. Firstly, this setup allows for a very quick and fluid playstyle with interesting movesets. Secondly, it offers rapid build-up of burn and ignite status effects, especially with the correct rune, ring, pendant, and umbral eye combinations. And finally, the weapons use a combination of fire and wither damage, which makes our damage output focus primarily on elemental damage, again, opening up some really interesting interactions when considering our rune and umbral eye choices. As previously explained, you may choose to wield one of these until you get your hands on a second one, or you can combine it with the Bloodlust short sword in the meantime. Just make sure that you factor in that Bloodlust can also scale off agility along with Inferno. This can be acquired from the chest in the area where you fight Crimson Rector Percival. We cover all things ARPG and FPS on this channel, so if you enjoy games like Lords of the Fallen, consider subscribing or joining the channel. We currently have a returning viewer base of 10,000 people, which is absolutely awesome. With 1,250 subscribers, that means 8,750 of you still haven't smashed that sub button. With that in mind, I'm also pleased to announce that channel memberships are now live, and another way that you can support the channel and the Phase Shift community. There are 3 different tiers which offer you perks, such as playing cooperatively with me during streams if the game allows it, access to the Phase Shift community Discord, and early access to some videos. Either way, whether you join the channel or subscribe, if you're enjoying the content, it really helps me out, and this interdimensional community welcomes you with open arms. Drop a like if you enjoy the video, and sound off in the comments below with any thoughts and questions. Now, back to the weapons. The Grinning Axe can be acquired in Castle Bramis, as indicated in the footage you're now watching, and it's fairly straightforward to get. The only thing that I would say is you get this weapon quite late on in the game, so if it's your first playthrough and you haven't yet got one, it might be better to look at something like Bloodlust or something else that's Inferno based, just to be a little placeholder until that point, folks. The 3 rune slots in this weapon are integral to the functionality of the build. Any combination of Trellis, Shon, and Sabino runes can be combined to fine-tune a balance between the speed of the status build-ups, elemental damage output, and life leech on hit. I personally opt to go with 1 Trellis and 2 Shon runes in each weapon, as I feel that Sabino's life on hit isn't worth it if you're making sure you play with finesse to avoid taking damage where possible. It should also be noted that you can only get 1 Shon rune per playthrough, and this will therefore have an impact on the choices of rune that you may select. You could also choose for increased fire damage from a Tyrnarch's rune, or opt for Dehalwi for further increased Inferno attribute scaling in the meantime. The choice is entirely yours. In terms of rings and pendants, our pendant of choice is the Pendant of Infernal Ablation. This increases our damage to targets which are burning, and based on our next ring choices on the rune setup, this will be very often indeed. The ring choices are very straightforward. A Ring of Infernal Devotion, which creates an interaction where inflicting burn build-up simultaneously inflicts ignite build-up, and a Ring of Wildfire, which ensures that when an enemy is damaged by the explosion from Ignite, it becomes Burn. So, with the rapid application of Burn and Ignite from our weapons and rune choices, this synergizes perfectly with this trio of items. What you're then left with is an incredibly high damaging, fast attacking, explosive proc machine that's very satisfying to play. However, there is another interaction which really is the icing on the proverbial cake here, folks. If you socket the Umbral Eye of the Bloody Pilgrim into our main lamp socket, we gain an effect which means light attacks deal bonus damage, but they only deal wither damage. So in essence, when we perform a light attack, we do approximately 20% more damage than we would have done previously, with the caveat that all the damage is instead rolled into wither damage. Now, usually this would be fairly useless, as you need to find another method of causing damage to an enemy to remove the withered health. However, because we have set this build up to continuously proc explosions, and because the Wildfire Ring interacts with Ignite, ensuring that once an enemy is ignited, they are also burned, this wither health literally is instantly removed and burnt away, essentially giving us a free increase of 20% damage. This is also useful because the grinning axes themselves also do wither damage, so this setup is really running a complementary array of gear. In terms of catalysts, I'm using Queen Sophisia's catalyst, as our investment is purely Inferno based. At plus 10, this comes with S tier Inferno scaling, and the spell power is just shy of 700, and it also has 5 spell slots, a simply sublime choice here. You can acquire this from completing the Tortured Prisoners quest line, so if you're looking for other options, the other 3 Inferno catalysts will do just fine. Roga's Heart, Searing Accusation, or Miranda's Touch are all viable. Starting with the Pirate Cultist is also beneficial here, as you'll start with a solid Inferno catalyst to sling spells with. Speaking of spells, our spells are what really tie this build together. The first 4 choices are pretty set in stone. We use 3 Adir Shout sorceries. Number 1, Adir's Endurance, which gives us an insanely quick stamina regen, which ensures we are able to sustain our onslaught of attacks consistently, which keeps the continuous Ignite procs flowing. This can be acquired from Damaros during her quest line, once you give her the Adir's Worshipper's Sword during an Infernal ending playthrough, so definitely avoid extinguishing any torches if you want this one, folks. Our second choice is Adir's Rage. According to the Fextra Life wiki, this gives us a flat 10% damage increase for 90 seconds, and upon testing, I do believe this to be accurate. This is again acquired from Damaros during a quest line for the Infernal ending. Our third choice is Adir's Hardiness. This gives us a flat 25% damage reduction for 90 seconds, an incredibly powerful spell, particularly for those of us who like to play Lords of the Fashion and value style points over defensive stat. This is located in the Bell Room doorway next to the Bell Room waypoint. Once you've reached the arena where you fight the Bell of Tenacity boss, follow the staircase on the left, and with a bit of searching you'll find a door that can only be opened with the Pilgrim's Perch key. The spell is in the chest in there. Our fourth spell choice is Infernal Weapon. This imbues our weapon with even more fire damage and synergizes really well with the previously mentioned aspects of the build. It also completes the build's aesthetic and ensures the Explosive Grin Reaper truly lives up to its name. Our fifth spell slot is flexible. I use Infernal Guardian most of the time. This summons a fire spirit that launches bolts of fire at your enemies intermittently and adds another layer of safety when you're trying to remove chunks of wither damage that you're doing through the Umbral Eye interaction discussed earlier. You can also swap this out for ranged spells such as Lava Burst or Infernal Orb if you'd like to add a more ranged element to your gameplay style. The choice again is entirely up to you. For all my Lords of the Fashion heads, here are your armor choices. If you're interested in the way this character looks, I'm using the Pirate Cultist hood with the Oathbreaker tinct, the Carrion Knight armor, Pure Blade gloves, and Holy Bulwark trousers. And these are all coloured with the Justice CR tinct. The mechanics of this build are very straightforward to play. Buff yourself with all 3 shout sorceries, imbue your weapon with Infernal Weapon, cast Infernal Guardian, and pop a mana cluster and a Brio Stone for good measure. Select your target, and then try to make sure that your attacks get in there first if you can. Ignite procs can often stagger enemies, and you can wind up stun locking your targets. If you get into this cycle, you're absolutely golden. If you're fighting groups, try and pick targets that will allow for the Ignite procs to overlap one another. This yields the best DPS output, and again, staggers opponents for fun. It's very satisfying watching mobs falling around the place, disintegrating to ash. If you don't land a stagger, be defensive and wait for those windows of opportunity to appear. This build works best if you think of it like a burst damage playstyle. It doesn't face tank and does require you to be defensive sometimes. The same approach should be taken with bosses. Focus on getting the ignites to proc and be confident knowing that once they're burning, you can chip them down with Infernal Guardian or your other ranged attack and do big damage when you hit them during those timed damage window openings. So, there we have it, folks. An explosive Grin Reaper to disintegrate and blow your enemies to pieces with a relentless whirlwind of frenzied elemental axe swings. Once again, thank you so much for checking out this video. I'm having an absolute blast coming up with creative and themed ideas for you to enjoy during your time with Lords of the Fallen. I have a few more in the works, but I'd love to hear if you have any suggestions or requests for styles and approaches to build. If you do, please do sound off in the comments below. I'd love to work in some community suggestions, and then maybe we could get some fun naming competitions going. This interdimensional community continues to surge forward. Keep bringing that positive energy, folks. With that in mind, if you want to see more content of this nature, please do smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to support. So, until next time, take care of yourselves, enjoy the build, and I'll see you in the next one, guys.